Then Freud starts to tell you about how what he calls the process of growing up. According to Freud, the process of growing up is not confined to the physical development. Rather, it is a very long, difficult, and a necessary process where a person starts to realize uh, uh, when a person starts to move from the pleasure principle to the reality principle, when the person instead of limiting himself to the reality, to the individual state of the reality principle, moves on to the societal state of the reality principle. So the pleasure is somehow controlled or kept under check, and that the movement from this pleasure principle to reality principle is called growing up. He says that because during the pleasure principle stage, all the decisions were made for the immediate gratification of pleasure only, whereas in the reality stage, or the reality principle governs all the decisions that are made because of the societal needs, the societal operations, and the societal obligations. So here Freud is giving the concept of uh, how a normal person, uh, or in the life of a normal person, the pleasure becomes secondary to the reality principle. And it is this, at this stage, where the moral sensibility, or the conscience of a child is it comes to the forefront for the first time. Then comes a very important concept, neurosis, according to uh, uh, Freud, is the the battle between the ego and id. How it does that battle occur? Because sometimes there are feelings or ideas that have been controlled uh, for a longer period of time, and they have not been expressed either through dreams or jokes or any other form of creativity. The ego must act, and it blocks the outward response. This inability to express one's repressed feelings or ideas results in neurosis, according to Freud. And it is expressed through a number of physical and psychological abnormalities. Freud asserts that it is the job of the psychoanalyst to identify the unresolved conflicts and then provide a therapy accordingly. Okay. And even he believes that this can be treated through the analysis of dreams as well. And it is only the psychotherapist who can help a patient to return back to normalcy. Then uh, as we move on, we come to, after Freud, we come to another important theorist, a psychologist, Northrop Frye, whose time period spans from 1912 to 1991, and he is called the father of archetypal criticism. He is the primary advocate of the principles of archetypal criticism or mythic criticism. His book is called, one of his books is called Anatomy of Criticism, four essays in 19, which was published in 1957. Though he borrows the concept of Carl Jung, who was a student of Freud. His concept of myth has been borrowed by Fry. However, he has um, Fry has not completely relied on Jung's ideas. Instead, he develops a very systematic approach towards interpretation. He says that the social history of text should not be considered, it should be rejected. Instead, a structure should be identified, or for him the structure is the mythic development which lies in all texts. For this, he says that all literature is on a sliding scale ranging from the most explicitly allegorical to the most anti allegorical or anti explicit. That is, he believes that literature has, because it makes use of allegories. So he says that some stories or some literature is completely allegorical, whereas on another extreme we have which those uh, uh, stories which are absolutely anti-allegorical, against allegory, or who do which do not make use of allegory. He his model involves uh, use of or interpretation of archetypal symbols. He says that all literature is comprised of symbols, and these symbols make a story. Okay, these symbols are when these myths or these symbols come together, they form an allegory, and a deeper story is told through these symbols. So he also emphasizes that the overall structural principles of literature are to be derived through archetypal criticism. Uh, and what would be the process of archetypal criticism? By studying the myths and symbols in a certain text and then interpreting it in a larger context. Uh, he says that myth is something like the Greek myths or the Roman myths. They are the that type of literature which have the most uh, im- implicit imagery, which make use of implicit imagery. And it is due to this imagery that a philosophical meaning is given to any text. These myths are very much dependent on symbols. Then he gives the concept of monomyth. He says that all literature comprises of one or a complete or whole story, which is called the monomyth. Mono means one, myth is myth. So he has his concept of monomyth has been divided into four circles, four sorry phases, which and this diagram is basically in the form of a circle. Each phase of a monomyth is it corresponds to the seasons of a year, and these seasons of year are symbolically symbolizing the peculiar cycles of human experience. I have drawn a small diagram to make things easier for you. Hopefully, it is going to help you in understanding Fry's concept of monomyth. He says that on the at the top of this diagram is is the romance phase, which is the summer story. At this phase, all wishes are fulfilled and complete happiness is achieved. That is, and they lived happily ever after. On the extreme at the bottom end is tragedy, which is the fall phase. Here we find a transformation from happiness and freedom to disaster. These are the two extremes, and in between on the right side is comedy, which is the spring phase. And here anti-romance and frustration, it takes it transforms into freedom and happiness. Whereas anti-romance phase, which is the winter story, it is the story of bondage, imprisonment, frustration, and fear, which means that it is the it is absolutely you know uh, negative. It has negative progression. These four phases of monomyth are, Fry believes that all stories can be placed on this diagram. His contribution to psychoanalysis is that he has provided a schematic or structural framework for all possible kind of stories. This framework it provides the context which can be identified in stories, and they can be studied according to their genre, their kind of symbolization, themes, points of view, and other literary elements. It also provides a background or context for literary criticism, and allows to compare and contrast stories on the basis of their relationships. Myths can also be studied through his model. And myths can not only be studied, they can be contrasted and interpreted through these models. So, Fry's schematics used Freudian analysis in practical criticism. That is the concept of id, ego, superego, and everything.